What are you a prisoner of? That's today's question. Hi, I'm Sunny, and I have 3 piles you guys can choose from. From left to right, I have pile 1, 2, and 3. So remember that if you need more time, you're more than welcome to pause the video when you're ready. Otherwise, I will go ahead and start with the first pile. So for pile number 1, it's going to be, I don't want to put it more so in the middle, but more so past, present, future kind of thing. So I have 3 piles for each pile, by the way. So for your first card, it's the 5 of Swords reversed, followed by the High Priestess upright, and then your last card is the 3 of Cups upright. So pile number 1, I feel that you're a prisoner of maybe your mind, of your past choices. I think in your past, I don't think you're necessarily too happy about how, I don't feel that you want something that you wanted. Or maybe it doesn't have to be more so like, example, like, hi, like I want this title or something. It just feels like you put up a good battle, but I don't think you won. I think that, I don't think you won because maybe you just weren't strategic, or maybe you gave it your best shot, but I think that you had to learn that you weren't the person who had the favor, or you weren't the person who had the what's it called, the upper hand. I think that maybe somebody else was playing dirty, or maybe you're the one that was being honest or strategic. It just feels like maybe you lost your temper, and maybe that's why you didn't win. It was more like a battle of patience, possibly. So it just feels here that that's where you're coming from, that you're coming from no longer, or maybe you are, but no longer being in this energy of like, I have to fight myself, like I have to fight myself or fight my way to basically be respected, or I have to fight myself to, like, it just feels like maybe you're not dynamics, but it just feels like you're fighting your mind, maybe, or maybe you're constantly putting up a fight. It doesn't even have to be with others. It just feels like maybe you had to constantly fight the battle of your mental health, for example. That's what you're coming from, where you're trying to fight that and be a winner, but maybe you didn't win quite the way you wanted to in the previous time frame. Or maybe you just felt like you lost because you had to take a breather, and you had to step away, maybe from being not public, but maybe so interacting with people. Maybe you had to walk away from that, the socialization of, like, you had to put yourself in isolation, and then maybe just you yourself put yourself in a cage, but maybe it was necessary, or maybe it allowed you to regroup and think about stuff differently, where you could have a good time now, right, with this 3 of Cups in the future. So in the present time, I feel the High Priestess, you're kind of using that time frame. I feel that the time alone that you had kind of gave you that re-strategizing feeling, or like that revamping of yourself, like, look, I can't do anything about my surroundings, like my stimulation that comes from like other outside sources is out of my hands. Maybe I'm wording it poorly, but you get what I'm trying to say. Anything outside that's given into you, it's just out of your hands, but you can control what's inside. So at least you can put yourself in a place that you can meditate, or you can put yourself in a place where you've researched how to improve that, or you've really gotten down to the nitty-gritty of what's really bothering you. It feels like you opened up that spiritual portal, or that religious portal, even at that, where you kind of just dismissed it before, or maybe you just focused on fighting stuff in the occult. Maybe that's where you went and like discovered something about yourself, or you feel open, or you feel comfortable, or maybe you discovered people that think alike. It just feels like you found what you needed behind closed doors, and that's what it's giving. And in the future, it feels like you're having a great time. So maybe the fact that you enlightened yourself feels that you can actually open up to people, or you found your niche and you finally are able to have fun. It just feels like you finally are going from this defeating feeling to finally opening up yourself, opening up your heart. It feels like you're feeling in your good feels, and it doesn't feel like you're as isolated as you once were. Maybe it was just one of those tough lessons where you had to learn that not everybody was going to be kind to you, or not everybody was gonna listen to you because you were you had different ideas, right? So let's say you were interested in stuff like that, or you're interested in like astrology, or you're interested in tarot readings, or you're interested in spirituality in other realms, like anything like that's going to open that third eye, or anything that's going to open yourself to maybe that conspiracy area. And maybe they just shunned you or just looked at you like you were weird or an outsider. So maybe that's where you felt kind of isolated. So maybe you took that moment as a learning lesson to really focus on how to regroup yourself and how to really just kind of remain in that mysterious energy. Like, you know what, that's okay. I'm just gonna keep this to myself, but I'm gonna still explore this because it's something I really enjoy learning about. So that's where you kind of felt like you started opening up, because you felt like you could think like other minds think like you, and you could really discuss these subjects more in detail, or you could just have meetups, or you just have a good time. Or maybe you're the kind of person who ends up going to meetups with like your favorite astrologers, for example. I've seen those, they're quite popular. Never been to them, but I've seen them, and it's cute. I think that maybe you end up meeting people and you have a good time, and you're like, oh, I'm not alone in this, like in this self-discovering journey. And that's where you feel like you finally found what it's like to be feeling home and safe and just open. So it's a cute little journey that you come from. So yeah, I mean, I think I started a little bit more negative, but it feels like it has a more livelier type of ending. So thank you, pile number 1. So next is pile number 2. So I start from where I'm going to start, like pile number 1, and the next pile 2, where it's past, present, and future. So for you guys have the Temperance reversed, followed by the 10 of Swords reversed. Sorry, I'm trying not to hit the camera with my hands. Followed by the 6 of Swords upright. There you go. So pile number 2. You're starting from this point. Sorry, I had to take a water break. You're starting from this point, like, what were you a prisoner of? I feel you might relate to some minor things when it comes to pile number 1. But I feel this pile is, and I knew it was gonna happen. Sorry, I knew my voice was about to crack. Just felt it. Sorry. With this Temperance card reverse, I feel like you might have felt like you lost your sense of self, maybe a sense of control. Just feels like something went out of balance, and it was possibly something that was more from your side rather than something that came from others, or any other thing that was like an outside source that was kind of maybe the trigger, right? So maybe you feel like you couldn't express yourself properly. Maybe you feel like, or felt, because this is past, I forget, this is past tense. You come from that reverse Temperance card where you kind of kept things to yourself. You weren't able to express yourself. Maybe you couldn't express your creativity, or you couldn't really express what felt right to you because you were kind of trying not to stir the pot or not to rock the boat, because maybe people around you wanted you to focus more on more realistic views or more realistic paths, for example. Sometimes it could be like, imagine yourself being attracted to wanting to play piano professionally, and they're like, well, that's great as a hobby, but I need you to focus on something more like on the STEM fields, for example. That's more logical for them to actually accept that it's a path that you can actually earn money, for example. Not necessarily that this is a money type of reading, but more so it's just, imagine that example of like you trying to pursue something that makes you feel happy internally, and you can't really express that or can't do that because other people want you to do something else, or you're trying not to, disappoint them, and maybe that's why you keep that to yourself. Maybe it's also something that you kind of repress, just some repression in here with this Temperance card. That's where you're coming from. Maybe you also didn't have the patience for it. Maybe it just was, maybe other people lost your patience, and that's why you had to keep things to yourself. I think overall this feels like maybe you couldn't rely on people like to actually listen to you, because it's something that's more private, maybe something that make you I just feel like it's a creativity, something creative or an emotion that doesn't feel like you could easily share with others, because people might not wish to understand it, or they just don't give you the time of day. Like something that was like that. Maybe you were gloomy. Maybe it's because you were kind of gloomier, like sad face, more like not depression necessarily, but You're more sadder feelings and you couldn't express them. So they're just like, suck it up. Just stop it. Just get over it. It just feels like that, where you had to repress it and just keep it to yourself, keep it to yourself. And you were just maybe like swallowing that in. You were maybe eating your feelings out with food. Maybe you were drinking or something. And you just kept maybe packing that way, for example. It could have been something so simple like that. But, you know, it was something that you could have dealt with it healthier, maybe had they just listened or just been a good support system. So maybe in the present time, that's why you might feel a little bit kind of, you're coming out of that. Even though you're coming out of that with that 10 of Swords reversed, it still feels heavy. It's the ending of a cycle. But it just feels like, unfortunately, you had to kind of be, maybe you were a target of people talking some ish about you, maybe because of your appearance, right? Maybe because you don't socialize, or maybe it was because they critique you for not doing enough for them, or maybe they critique you for being selfish, right? For whatever reason, if you put yourself sometimes first, sometimes people can put that as, you're extremely selfish, like, why didn't you answer your calls, or something that is just, you just decided to take that day off for yourself, or maybe that moment, and suddenly your phone keeps blowing up, and maybe that's why you're like, I'm just done. Or maybe people start talking bad about you because you just start ignoring them because you want to take the high road, but they start a lot of drama. So maybe that's where you're coming from, where you're like, you're exhausted, sorry, and you're tired. You keep hearing people talking behind your back, and you know it. It's just, it feels like you can't address it because you don't have the stamina for it, or you don't have the patience for it, or you don't have the proper words to really express yourself correctly, because I know you can say stuff, but it just feels like you might not say the right words, or you might not aim it at the right person, or maybe if you do, it's just you can't quite express it just very detailed. It just feels like you might sound like a child crying, for example, and you're just like, and I wanted to say, like, it just feels like maybe you might be stopped frequently, and then they pick on you for that because you're not, like, you can't just dish it without getting emotional, for example. So maybe that's where they're coming from. So in the future, with the 6 of Swords upright, it feels like you could be walking away and taking a decision of just ignoring them. I feel like you're already in that progress. You're just ending that cycle of putting some closure on those ends, like tying those loose ends. There you go. But unfortunately, it still feels like it has a mental stress on you, and it's giving you a lot of anxiety, or maybe it keeps you up at night too. It's giving you a lot of those nights of like, I can't sleep because my phone keeps ringing, or I can't sleep because I keep thinking about this issue, or what I could have said, but I didn't say it because I just didn't want to say it in front of everybody, or I didn't want to say it because they were going to question me and just corner me, and I can't think as fast maybe as they can. So it's one of those things where maybe you overthought something, but you've been thinking about this for quite some time, until you finally feel like, you know what, the best decision I can do for myself is just walk away or avoid them, or just completely just cut out those connections. And that's all I can do. Maybe I just don't have the proper words right now, and maybe one day I will, but that's not something I can do in person. So maybe that's why you feel kind of not in a great space, but it feels like you might feel like you lighten up the load. Maybe you might not feel that immediately, but like that sense of like relief, but I feel that you will. So that's more like something that you're trying to walk away from your past, present, and future. It's like more or less that situation, how it kind of smooths out over time, but it might not be easy for you to kind of follow through. But that's what I have for you, pile number 2. So I hope you enjoyed that. This was very interesting. So pile number 3, you guys have, I started with pile 1 and 2 as 3 cards of past, present, and future from left to right. So I will do the same with you. You guys have the 5 of Pentacles reversed, followed by the King of Wands upright. And then your last card is the 5 of Wands reversed. So, there you go. I'm trying to center them. So, what a great job I did. It's all centered to the right. It's okay. It's still kind of linear. So, pile number 3, what are you a prisoner of? So, more or less, this is kind of how the story flows with you. Might not be exactly like word by word, but it might kind of give you an idea. So, you start out with the 5 of Pentacles reversed. So maybe you were coming from a place where you finally feel like you have good footing right? I think good foot and yeah, good footing. Basically, like maybe you felt like you lost some finances, right? Or maybe you got fired, or maybe you got sick and you needed downtime, or maybe you were stuck in a place where you were secluded and isolated. Like you were getting help, right? Maybe professional help. But nonetheless, you had to kind of take it slower, right? And it was likely not that great for you. It feels like you were coming in a place where you had to maybe just depend on yourself. You were seeking help, but maybe you just got very limited help. Like you did receive it, but it just feels like you didn't get that quite the help you wanted to. And much of it had to do, like example, like if, let's say, this isn't medical advice, by the way, but it's just maybe a scenario you can relate. So like, let's say you got the flu and you go to the doctor, but you had to pay out of pocket. But then you needed to have like another visit and you couldn't quite afford it, so you had to just stick with what you could over counter stuff, or maybe over the counter stuff, sorry, or maybe like you needed to go to a specialist, but you couldn't have the money, or maybe you had to wait to go, and so it was like a financial loss, but still like it was a burden to you to kind of wait that long for something to finally come through and kind of give you like a good route to direct yourself in. So it's one of those things where you feel that you have to kind of take it slower and just figure out how to best manage your pain or best manage your finances and in your time of need, right? So it just feels like that. But you're walking away from that. So it feels like it might have taken you some time, but not that long. It's just some downtime. And then you're present with the King of Wands. I feel that you finally got, maybe somebody helped you, maybe a male figure, maybe this is you, or maybe you just become that energy of like the King of Wands, where it's someone that's very goal oriented, and you finally have your energy back, right? It feels like it was one of those obstacles you overcame, but you overcame it with like 100, like like the total 100, and like you got it back, right? So it feels like it was a lot of dedication from your part, a lot of not self-confidence, but like self-doing. Like you, like encompassing that fiery energy is like you did all the hard work. You didn't depend on anybody else, and if somebody did help you out, they were raising the bar for you to continue to do that hard work of recovering. So it just feels like that, where they had high expectations of you and you met them, or you had high expectations of yourself and you met them, and you learned to kind of continue to do what you wanted to do. It just feels like an obstacle maybe. So maybe you learn to stand on your own. That's basically it. It's not relying on anybody with the King of Wands. And this is a really fun energy. I mean, I think it's fun. If this is the type of scenario I think of, but I think it's a really fun energy to be like, yeah, F everybody. I was gonna say whatever. F everybody. I'm just gonna do me. I'm just gonna focus on me and what I want to do, and I'm just gonna continue my grind, right? I'm not gonna let people fool me. I'm not gonna let people take advantage of me financially, or in like strategically, or like anything like that. So a very direct person, not stubborn. I just feel like it's very direct energy, very self-reliant and independent. There you go. A very independent streak to you, where you're like, you stand on a high ground, but it's well deserved. With the future, with the Five of Wands reverse, it feels like you no longer have to fight people off. So I think, sorry, I moved the camera. I think that with the Five of Wands reverse, no one's gonna come at you. Maybe you no longer have to fight people off, maybe, and maybe that's where you're coming from, where like you feel maybe at first you were defeated, and so maybe there's this like energy like that with one of the previous piles, but it's a little slightly different. It just feels like you took a loss. This feels like you took a financial, like a physical loss. So maybe example, like in a romantic sense, you could have been with somebody for a long time, right? But then suddenly you're separating, or suddenly you're getting a divorce, and you have to divide assets, and you're kind of like, damn, I have nothing, so I have to just kind of do with what I have, or sell some of my stuff to make it through, and just keep my minimal necessities, right? So you took a blow like that, and then finally you're like, okay, fine, I'm single, not ready to mingle, but just kind of single and do my own thing. And then finally, like, you're no longer having to fight for those assets, or you're no longer having to fight your ex-partner for things that are well deserved for you. Like, it's like not necessarily being fair, but you got what you needed, right? And you stand on your ground. You're not going to rely on them for anything else. So it could be like that, right? And sometimes it's like that. But in the financial sense too, where you're no longer having to fight people off for what you want, because you don't rely on their, like, if they want to help you out, great. If they don't, I messed that one up. If they want to help you out, great. If they don't, that's not necessary for you. You can do your own work. You kind of weed out people like that, but you kind of size them up too. I think you enjoy sizing up people because you taunt them. Like, I think now that you recovered in the present moment, you're like, oh, I've been waiting this for, like, I've been waiting to kind of take out my temper for a good while. And you're like, I'm here. Not necessarily you trying to be a dictator. You are like a very, like, just feels like a mischievous energy here, where you taunt people to get a stir out of them, like to get a rise out of them, and to get their energy out. But you could still handle your own energy. It doesn't feel like you lose anything in it. It just feels like you like to pick at them, but you don't lose anything. You know? Like, it's just interesting. So, yeah, I think it's overall something that you're walking away from, like, being in a position where you weren't in favor, or being in a position where you weren't with your most energy or your weakest, or in a place where you had to kind of just be patient. And now you're like, I learned how to be patient even though I didn't want to, but it just feels like I can finally just kind of move on and focus on what I want and what my needs are. And that's more or less something that I think you're kind of breaking it already though. I think you're becoming very independent. You're avoiding any confrontations, or at least people know better not to, because I think that you kind of have been putting people in their place slowly, or all the pieces started making more sense and being put together for your picture to finally work. So it feels nice for this pile, where it's like, I went from not nothing to something, but more so I went from relying on people to just relying on myself, or putting myself first and not giving more than I need to. Kind of like, you might have been the person to maybe just, sorry, I keep moving the camera, I'm sorry. So you might have been the person who kind of just focuses on helping others, maybe possibly too, in a financial way, or maybe it was draining for you to take care of others that didn't reciprocate that back. So you're like, finally, like after this separation or after this low point, you're finally able to focus on yourself. Or if you are together with a person, for example, you're finally able to just put your needs first and not focus on them so much, because they're not as dependent on you as they need it to be, right? So take what actually resonates, but it's a really nice message here of victory, but in a much like less aggressive way. I mean, it is technically fiery, but it's balanced. I feel it's much more balanced and mature. I think you pick out your battles, but you let them know. It's like, don't poke the bear too much. The bear is still sleeping, but the bear is there as a guardian, like as a guardian type of spirit, you know. But yeah, overall, that's what I have for you, pile number 3. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching, and please like, subscribe, comment, and share. It helps me out with my algorithm, and I'll see you soon. So bye everybody.